Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Today's guest should not be alive. Now, I know that's a big statement, but when someone has been shot 14 times, it's a reasonable statement to make. You'll be shocked when today's guest talks about this incident. I also think you'll be inspired by his resilience and durability to not only survive, but heal from this violent event. Today's guest, Derrick McManus, served 42 years in the South Australian Police Force, a large portion of which was spent in the Special Task and Rescue Group, known as the STAR Group. As a result of the shooting incident, he has an approach to life of an attitude anything better than death is an absolute bonus. And today he's going to share with us his story. Derrick McManus, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Great to be here with you, Gary.
Well, we first started communicating a couple of years ago after we've just both left the police. So that would have been about 3 or 4 years ago. How's life been for you outside of the police?
I have really enjoyed myself. Absolutely loved time after the police. But I've got to say that my time in the police, I absolutely loved as well.
I like those stories because that's the way I look at my my police career. I enjoyed the whole time. That every day was a new adventure in the policing world. But
yeah, absolutely. But that's what we enjoyed, though, isn't it? A new adventure, a challenge, problem to solve. That's what I really enjoyed.
Well, you certainly had a big problem to solve after you'd been shot 14 times. Now, we all joined the police and we understand the risk that involved, and you headed in the direction of tactical policing, and that ramps up the odds, I suppose. I went down that path as well. You always have it in the back of your mind that you could either have to take someone's life or get shot yourself. Is it something that you considered when you joined the police?
Listen, when I joined the police, I was just full of beans and just wanted to be part of it. I didn't really think about it too much. And it was just one of those things you're sort of aware of, but you don't really talk about. And you think about, if you do take someone's life and then that just becomes too much to think about and you go, maybe I don't want to. I don't want to think about it. But once I joined Tactical, once I joined Star Group, I had to consciously consider that in even greater depth because I became a sniper. I went and trained with the SAS in counter-terrorism, and we were going into high-risk arrests and hostage siege situations. So it became more of a reality.
Yeah.
And a couple of incidents prior to joining Starries, and I actually sat down and said, I've got to really give this deep consideration.
Yeah, well, I think it's naive if you don't, because once you go down that path and you're starting to be trained up tactically and the use of weapons, the weapons are for one thing, and
absolutely,
and that's your job. I've watched the way you've gone about your business since leaving the police, and what you're doing. You come across as a very considered, peaceful type person. Is that where your life is at the moment?
I like to think that's where my life's always been, considered and peaceful. And when I say considered, I haven't always been mature. We always have that edge of immaturity in us, and I embrace that to a degree. But I like to think that I prefer non-violence to any violence, despite the fact that I was in a confrontational, highly impactful confrontational environment where we were dealing with some of the worst offenders, and being confrontational was what we were required to do. I like to be more peaceful than confrontational.
I've found that people that I've met during my my police career, but also people outside the work I've been doing and guests I've had on the podcast, a lot of people that have been in environments where violence is the norm or confronted violence in a life-threatening situation like yourself, seem to have a different take on life. There seems to be a calmness about them. Do you think that brings a calmness?
I really haven't considered that too much. I guess when you become accustomed to it, you can either go two ways, because if you're brought up in violence in maybe a criminal environment, then that is just going to be endemic and it's just going to continue on. But being in a confrontational environment in the police, our aim was to find peaceful resolution, and that was always my aim. And that once you start focusing on peace, then that's what you'll find.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just want to give our listeners a sense of when I talk about the shooting incident, and we're going to talk in detail about it later. But I just want to give the listeners a understanding of the magnitude of what you went through. So there was a article in the newspaper that described your shooting incident, and if I could just take the time to read that out. This is how the shooting was described. Derrick was shot not once but 14 times. 2 bullets struck his left forearm, the force so great it breaks a bone, while another 2 bullets ripped through his stomach, 2 hitting his left thigh, another bullet through his right Achilles tendon, 3 bullets to his left calf, a bullet striking his right knee, and shrapnel lodging in his right list. That's a pretty heavy situation, Derrick, you found yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, you're talking about reality before. How I describe my response to that and my management of that is that I prepared myself physically, mentally, and emotionally for what I could realistically expect to encounter. You can't go into special operations, confrontational environment and sort of live in that dream world of it happens to other people, it's never going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Star Group had been around for 17 years. It had never happened in the history of Star Group, but you can't rule it out. So I had to prepare myself for it. And I was very fortunate that I had prepared myself physically, mentally, emotionally. The doctors say that I should not have survived. The first doctor to get to me said that all the textbooks say my heart should have stopped. The only reason my heart didn't stop is I hadn't read the textbooks. So they are his words.
Sometimes ignorance is a blessing in disguise. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You were too stupid to die.
Yeah, well, and I embraced that.
Yeah.
But I was lying on the ground for 3 hours bleeding after those injuries before they could get in to rescue me. And I was about to say safely rescue me. When they did come in to rescue me, they risked their lives, literally put their lives on the line to come in and get me.
Yeah, that's another layer to the incident that we're going to explore, that the fact that it wasn't that you got shot and the rescue, you got treated immediately. There was a period of time, hours in fact, where you had to wait to be rescued, and there was still shots being fired by the person who shot you. So it's an amazing story, which we will get into, but I just want to talk a little bit about who you are. I wanted to give people a sense of, when we reference the shooting incident, the magnitude of it. But you're in South Australian Police for 42 years.
42 years, yeah.
That is a long career in anyone's time, especially in policing.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in the current environment, there are not many people staying in any job for 42 years. When I joined, it was a dedication, a vocation. And it wasn't just a job, and that was drilled into us that we were joining, and we were joining essentially for life. But loved every day of that 42 years. You know, obviously there's some tough days, including the day I got shot.
Yeah.
But 42 years of challenge, change, some, lots of trauma. I've seen people die in car accidents and all those sorts of things, but do you know something? I knew what I was taking on when I came into the job, and I enjoyed being able to help people through that environment that they were struggling with.
Yeah. You make an interesting point calling it a vocation. I've said that myself, that when I joined it was a vocation. That was my passion. That's what I was going to do, and I was signed up for the duration. There seems to be a change in that, but it's not just policing, it's everywhere. Like, people dabble in this career and then have a look, and I'm not criticising them, it's just an observation. But the experience you get as a police officer for 42 years, I spent 34 years in the police, and I still learnt every day I came to work. There was something else I picked up, another skill, or just things that you pick up. You can't bypass that, can you? The experience you get.
No. And if you stop learning, then you're in serious trouble. And it may just be a different way to be able to engage with someone in a conversation, or diffuse the situation, or whatever it might be. You've just got to keep on learning. We've got to evolve. Society evolves. We've got to evolve with it.
What made you join the police?
This is almost an embarrassing part of the interview for me.
Good. Okay, you got my attention.
My brother is 2 years older than me, and he is my hero. Always has been, still is. And when we were younger, my brother said he wanted to join the police force. And I've just gone, my hero wants to join the police force, I will too. And all the friends and family said, oh, Derrick, you only want to join the police because your brother did. No, I want to do it for me. No, I'm an independent, as much as, a 7, 8, 9-year-old can say those sorts of things. And then when my brother actually got work, he changed his mind and he became a butcher. But I couldn't change my mind because that would prove everybody else right. So I've gone on and it was a good career, and I've loved every minute of it. I was never a fully immersed police officer. And I think that's always been a bit of a good balance for me. There are people that join the police and they live, breathe, eat, sleep, holiday, everything about police. They read about police. And I've had what I would like to think is very balanced. I'm very, very dedicated. You can't be in Starries in special ops unless you're absolutely dedicated.
Yep.
But I was also dedicated to a life outside of the police as well and enjoying both sides. And I think that's been a bonus, that it gave me a great balance.
I interested in what you say there, because I think that probably extends your career. That the best relief I got from the stressful situations I saw in the police was catching up with friends or other interests that I've got totally separate from the police, where no one's really interested in what you're doing in the police. You're being judged on what you're doing in this environment, or old friends that you get caught up with being serious because you're a cop, and they just take the piss out of you. And I think it's good. It gives you a balance.
Absolutely. Like I played police basketball and travelled Australia playing police basketball against other police officers, but I had 2 teams outside of police that were just civilians. That's a very bad terminology. I take that back. They are civilians.
You'll get us in trouble on social media. Just civilians. Jesus, I've heard about those people who are just civilians. Yeah, but that's it's funny, isn't it? That's the police thinking. You get locked into, and that's why it's good at what you've identified, the need to step out of the policing, because otherwise it's, there's them and there's us if you just focus too much on policing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I ran gymnastics clubs and all those sorts of things as well, which is completely outside the police. And again, I think it's that balance. You've obviously got to have a focus on police if you want to be serious and you want to be safe. But to keep that balance and de-stress, because that was an important part of it.
Well, it is a good way to recharge, isn't it? Where you're taken away from that policing environment and you freshen yourself up.
Yeah, absolutely. If all your friends are police, that's the only conversation you're having, and sometimes that will degenerate down into bitching, moaning, complaining, and everybody gets on that bandwagon, and that just builds up the stress and the negativity. Where I'd like to think I refreshed as much as possible. Still acknowledging the negative sides of the challenges that we were facing, but yeah.
Okay, how old were you when you joined the police?
16 3/4.
Okay, so that's
just before my 17th birthday.
As a cadet, I would imagine.
As a cadet, and I did a 3-year training as a cadet.
Yep.
Back in the days when it was absolutely, they took us in as children. And developed us, and we graduated as adults.
And they would have taught you your typing skills and all the important stuff that you need to learn at that stage?
When I look back on all the stuff that we learned the typing skills. We had maybe a dozen lessons on how to read 24-hour clock. We had lessons on social etiquette, which knives and forks to use, and make sure you bring your girlfriend home by 10 o'clock at night. That's, it was 42 years ago that, 47 years ago that I joined the police. So that's what the focus was. They were developing young men.
I noticed there was a difference. There was a manner in the way that cadets, and it was phased out by the time I joined, but the people that I was working with that were cadets, they had a depth of knowledge about policing that was just embedded into them. It was almost, you could tell the difference between cadets or people that had joined and just passed through the academy.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure of my complete perspective on that, because I think the 3 years that I spent in training was a fair bit of it was a waste of time. It was not focused on policing per se.
Yep.
And they were developing young boys into young men as well as into police officers. Certainly, a more focused curriculum is more valuable, but they're racing them through these days.
Yeah.
We were having people go through in 6 months, and you just can't get that sort of experience in 6 months.
No, it's virtually throwing you out in the deep end, and you either sink or swim. When was the time that when you did hit the streets as a sworn police officer, that when you realised this is serious? Like you saw it might have been the traffic accident, the domestic, or whatever. Where all police have got those stories where you think, okay, I knew this might happen, but this is what I signed up for.
I don't think there were any great surprises earlier on. Probably back in my day, pub brawls were a big thing.
Yeah.
And when we went into pub brawls and people were just punching each other out and there were split heads on the ground, and it's like, holy smoke, people are actually getting injured, and this could be me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a different time, wasn't it? That's
very different time. Fights still happen these days, but this is an all-in pub brawl, and there were 3 or 4 on a weekend just in our area. Yeah.
Well, it's a reflection on society. We've evolved and changed, and it's sort of not acceptable. But back in those days, it was the norm. It was nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder how much that's got to do with the drinking culture as well, because drinking has changed a lot in the days as well.
Yeah.
People are not drinking as much, drinking and driving as much, so they're moderating their drinking. But we're also, as you say, evolving as a society.
Yeah.
We're not... toxic masculinity is not what it used to be. It's still there, but it's not what it used to be.
Definitely there's a change to it, and it's not acceptable, with that before... Yeah, the drinking, the drink driving, the fights at the pub, that was almost like it's a rite of passage, but it's...
Absolutely.
We're looking at it for what it is and the damage that can be done from it. When did your interest... So your early part of your career, your general duties police?
Yep, general duties, working the beats in the malls and in the busy nightclub areas in Adelaide. Then went back out onto the road and general duties. Did some work in the office as well, but that was the majority of my career in the early days.
And look, general duties, and I know the focus, because of my career, I spent a lot of time in plain clothes as a detective, but for front-end policing, general duties is the front-end policing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I pretty much, as a detective, had a good sense of the type of work I'd be doing each day. But as a general duties officer, you never knew what you were going to be turning up to or responding to.
Correct. And it was different every day. Going to people committing arsons on buildings and catching them in the act was one of the favourite ones of mine. Going to car accidents. I've been in a car accident where a semi-trailer and a car collided. The semi was on top of the car, and I was speaking to the driver of the car, stuck in the car, and I heard the blood rising in his lungs as he drowned in his own blood, and I had last words with him before he passed away. Those sorts of things.
Yeah,
it's
they
very
do.
Different on general duties.
They stick with you, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate though. They don't stick with me in a negative way. I'm very fortunate not to have the trauma that a lot of people have associated with experience in the police department. And I think that was an open-mindedness to going in and having some anticipation of what I was going to deal with, and then having some ability to deal with it, but also just getting out and finding another avenue to relax outside the department where my mind would just completely wind down and then go back into it.
Derrick, I fully understand that, and people say that I spent a long time in the police, and how did you survive? And it's interesting that you say it was the world or the life that you had outside the police. helped you cope with things. I was the same way. Stay in contact with old friends. I also got into martial arts. That helped me in that my worries at work weren't a concern when I was getting kicked in the head in a boxing ring or whatever. So you take your stress away. But I think it's great. And maybe, with all the people suffering from stress these days, we've got to look at that what is your outlet? What is your release? So you're not focused 24/7 on the job.
Absolutely. And that is my focus these days. It's less stress, more success. Because it is possible, no matter what your job, no matter what your vocation, no matter what your passion is, we can reduce our stress and have more success when we're focusing in certain directions.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely worthy of further discussion. Tactical policing. What drew your interest to that, and tell us the path to becoming a member of the Star Group?
This is almost an embarrassing story as well. I had been in the police, and as I say, it wasn't my absolute passion to get into the police. And after about 13, 14 years, I was getting bored because it wasn't fulfilling me. It was still a great job. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't fulfilling me. And I started looking around, and this shows you how old I was. I was looking through the newspaper at the job advertisements. There was no Seek in my day. And as I was looking through the paper for jobs, people were coming to me, Derrick, why leave? This is a great job. Why don't you join the CIB, go to the dog squad?
Yeah.
And then someone said, why don't you join Star Group? And I've gone, do you know something? There is nothing else that I can find that I'll enjoy at the moment. Star Group got all the boys' toys you could ever ask for, planes, trains, helicopters, abseiling, weapons, all those sorts of things. That sounds like an interesting vocation. I'm going to go and have a crack at that. And it literally was, I'll go and have a crack at that.
And I just want to explain what the Star Group is. And
okay.
I've got to say, I looked at you guys because I was involved in tactical policing as well, and even rescue squad work interested me. And then I look at you guys, called yourself Star Group for a start. That's sort of, I'm going, okay, what's that all about? And
that's a little bit bold.
Yeah, a little bit bold, but everything that you want to do in policing, you guys were doing. It sounded like a fantastic position. So just so people understand what STAR stands for, you weren't calling yourself All Stars, the acronym for.
No, Special Task and Rescue. So it involved high-risk arrest, hostage siege, counter-terrorism, VIP security to the Queen when the Queen came out. And so that was another balance within our job because we had to be able to fulfill protocols and be polite and be interactive with very high-level people. So VIP security, high-risk witness protection, but then helicopter operations, cliff rescue, cave rescue, search and rescue for lost people. And I was also a diver, underwater recovery as well. And diving is a very high stress, but you need to be in a low stress mindset to be able to be good at it.
Yeah. It certainly covers a wide range of skills and expertise. So you just don't rock up there and they just accept you. I would imagine there would be a selection course, quite a difficult selection course.
Absolutely. The selection course is not dissimilar to every selection course in every state, but it's very much aligned with the SAS. The SAS is obviously a hell of a lot more intense, a lot longer, but it's aligned with the SAS selection course with that sort of intensity. And, there are people that have, even if you finish the selection course, doesn't mean you've passed it. There are people that have finished the selection course 4 times and still never passed it.
Yeah.
So it's a very intense course. And everybody thinks the selection course is based on physical fitness, and if you're physically fit, you'll get through. The physical fitness is 1/16 of the selection criteria. The rest is decision-making, ingenuity, initiative, leadership, fellowship, and a whole range of leadership skills. And being able to handle adversity and change. In fact, there are some exercises that they throw us into that there is no solution to. They know we cannot solve it, and they want to see how we handle a situation where we can't find a solution.
And that can really mess with your mind, isn't it? If you're aspiring to something and they give you a task, I just know how that would play with my mind. I'd be going, what am I doing wrong? You'd be questioning yourself. It's really breaking you down.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when you know that you're being assessed for, a high-level selection and you cannot solve this problem. You feel like a failure, and that's all they're yabbering in your ear. That's all they're saying. You're a failure. Why can't you solve this? You're useless and you want to get into Star Force. What makes you think? So they're just playing with your mind the whole time, knowing that you can't pass it. And you've got to be able to go through that exercise and then say, okay, I need to leave that behind me now and focus forwards and pass the next thing and solve the next problem. And that becomes a life skill as well.
It's an interesting comment and an important life skill. Like, how often do we stuff up because we're dwelling on a mistake that we've made, and while we're dwelling on that, we're stuffing up again. It's really being able to, put that behind you and then focus on what's in front of you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about not focusing on the problem and finding the solution. And there's an analogy about downhill skiers who are going through forests. And if you look at the footage from a body-worn camera for these downhill skiers, all you see is the trees, and you go, oh my God, how can you miss the trees? But the analogy is the skiers are not looking at the trees. The skiers are focusing on the gaps. And that's all they see. They just see there's another gap, there's another gap, there's another gap, and they just continue on down. And so when we focus on the solution, we're more likely to see it.
Okay, so it's just the mindset where you. Did you find it felt right for you, that being put under that type of pressure? Is it something that you thought, I after getting through, and even during the process, did you ever question yourself, why am I putting myself through this?
No, I'm a strange individual. I loved the selection process. It was hard, it was grueling, it was painful. Over a 3-day period, we only got about 6 hours sleep, and I just loved every part of it. Doubted my mind, doubt in my mind all the time, going into gas-filled environments and having to deal with tear gas, attacking every little orifice in your body. But I absolutely loved it, and I look back on it, and I think it's one of the best things that I could have done. I enjoy taking on challenges.
Yeah.
To the extent that just recently I rode my mountain bike over the top of the Himalayas.
That's a challenge.
5,416 metres at minus 15, and loved every moment of that as well. So challenge is something that I've just enjoyed in my life.
Yeah. And for a course too, and like the tactical courses I went through, I look back at them with fond memories. And you mentioned the gas room and all the other little things that they put on you. But when you get through, you feel like you've achieved something too. There's a sense of, I've been tested, and it's good to be tested. And in my bizarre mind, I'd be thinking, and we're getting paid for this as well? It was, I suppose it's a strange mindset, but that's the way I looked at it. So I'm getting paid to get yelled at and have all this fun. It's a conversation I have with people all the time. They say, oh my gosh, how could you go into Star Group? That's such a dangerous environment. And yes, there is an element of danger, but we've got all the boys' toys you could ever ask for. Yeah.
And we get paid to play with those things. People pay thousands of dollars to go and, play with these toys on a weekend. Jumping into helicopters and flying out to the ocean, jumping out of the helicopter into the ocean, and then getting picked up in a wire cage and flown around, sitting underneath the helicopter. That's just sensational fun.
Yeah, I get it. I do get it. So you got through the course, you got through all the selection course, and then you trained up on all the different skill sets. Which how long was the process before you became qualified?
There's a 3-month training or phase-in period.
Yep.
Where you are operational on the team. Well, there's probably a 2-week period where you're just pure training on weapons, on tactics, on ropes, on protocols within the Star Group, and then you are phased in. You are put on the team, but you are, the back end guy. You are the last selection for going into a job. And as you gain more experience over 3 months, then they can just basically use you where they see your skills lie.
Right. You enjoyed it, obviously.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Can you describe an average day, or can you describe the type of things that you might have done in a general sense?
So one of the things that people wouldn't think of is the average day is boring.
Yep.
The average day is just going about cleaning, checking equipment. If you've got no equipment to clean and nothing to particularly do, then we'll go out and we'll get some ropes and we'll hang off the side of a building and we'll practice rescues. And so it's kind of monotonous and boring. But when the work's on, the work's on.
Yep.
And when the work's on, it is just completely focused. And we can get a call. In fact, we got a call to go to a country town where we had to fly by helicopter, and we were away for 3 days looking for a murderer in the bush.
Yeah.
And you don't get an opportunity to call your family and say, oh, listen, hey, now can you prepare dinner for when I get back, or whatever it might be. You're just gone and they have to deal with it. And that's the sort of call that you would be waiting for, that you would want. Another job that I got was down the southeast, where we had to drive for about 3.5 hours. And that churned into a job of 24 hours overtime down there, just looking for an armed offender. But we would be called out 3 to 4 times a week for a high-risk arrest, assistance with catching some armed robbers or violent offenders, or where there's been some violence within a family situation, and somebody's been held hostage, and we've got to go in and defuse that.
Okay, so it's is the sharp end of policing, and very exciting end of policing. I see it as what you're
absolutely.
doing. You've been trained for that, trained for those skills, and you're doing it. How big was the unit back in the day?
58 people. We're the biggest unit in Australia.
Yep.
But that's because we included the rescue section in it as well. Federal government funds, I think it's 30 people to be trained in counter-terrorist skills.
Yeah.
And South Australia decided to throw some extra people in there for all the other jobs that we do.
Okay. How long had you been in there before the incident that led to the shooting? How long have you been a Star Group member for? 5
years.
Okay, so you would have been feeling pretty comfortable with your work and the environment and the people you were working with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd been away to Swanbourne in Perth and trained with the SAS in counter-terrorism, and that is a lot of weapons skills.
Yeah.
And so my skills were reasonably high at the time. You know, exactly what that means, I don't know, but my skills were reasonably high and I was reasonably confident, yeah.
Okay. Were you married, kids at the time? What was your family situation like?
Yeah, I was married. I had 2 stepchildren and 2 biological children.
Yep. And so there was a lot of time away from home?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I go back to that balance. There was a lot of time away from home, a lot of dedication at work, but my family were always my main priority.
Yeah.
And every moment that I could spend with my family, spending time sitting down, reading books and playing games with the kids. I'm not sure my wife thought I was totally involved with the marriage rather than just with the children. But it was that family environment that I absolutely loved. That was more important than my job. My job had to be important.
Yeah.
But again, it's that balance.
And that relationship with your children. Okay, so leading up to the shooting incident, describe how you got called to it, what the job involved.
Well, this was one of those run-of-the-mill days. We started work. I'd ridden 20 kilometres to work on my bike, push bike, my bicycle. We did an hour of training, physical training, when we started work. Then, because there wasn't much happening, I was able to go out and play police basketball while getting paid. As a police officer, I was playing police basketball. And then we got a call saying that we needed to go and arrest a high-risk offender. I'd been involved in 2 jobs with this person previously. And so we knew his history. We knew there was a potential for him to be violent, but he'd never actually done anything of violence before. But we got the call that he'd been in court the day before and was required to attend court on this day. And his wife had rung up and said, he can't turn up in court today because he's in the Nuriupta hospital. One small flaw in that excuse for not turning up to court, there is no Nuruyupta hospital.
Okay.
So they've gone, oh, hang on a second.
Not the best
and it
laid.
may have just been a mistake in words because he did go to the Nuruyupta Medical Centre.
Yeah.
But when they said the Nuruyupta Hospital, red flags have gone up, and the court immediately issued a warrant for his arrest. That was sent straight down to Star Group, and we were asked to go and arrest him. So straight back to barracks, in for a briefing at barracks, drove about an hour to the Barossa Valley, Nuruyupta, engaged with the local police there and enrolled them to assist us. A briefing given to every one of those guys and girls that were there in that briefing, and everybody knew their roles.
What was the profile of the shooter? And we can use his name, can't we? Tony Gosser. It's all been dealt with and before the courts.
Yep, absolutely. Tony Gosser.
And what was the profile that warranted Star Group to come and effect the arrest?
He was in court for 197 counts of fraud.
Right.
And fraud is just ripping people off. That's purely all it is. But when he was first investigated for the frauds, and we're now talking 35 years ago when he was first investigated for the frauds, the local country police where he was living rang him up and said, "Hey, listen, we need to talk to you about these fraud matters. Can you come into the police station?" As they did back in the day, and most people would acquiesce and come on into the police station. He said, "No, I'm not coming in." And they said, "Okay, well, we'll have to come out and see you at your property." And his statement at that time was, "Any cop who comes to my place is going to get shot."
Right.
So as soon as you make a statement like that, bang, you go to the top of the list of high-risk offenders. So the local detectives called us and Starries. We went out to the property at midnight. We did a midnight leopard crawl through the paddocks up to his windows and doors. And as the police were walking up the driveway, we were listening for him preparing weapons or doing whatever he might do to start shooting people. He did nothing. He basically just rolled over, and when they knocked on the door and he saw that Star Group was there, he said, "Oh, what's all this about? Oh, didn't you know I was joking?" So, but we took his weapons away from him, and obviously his firearms license as well, because he was now a dangerous person and had to be assessed. But he went to the court and said, "Hey, listen," and he had some very nice weapons. He was a collector. He said, "The police won't look after my weapons very well, and they'll be rusty. You can't give my weapons back to me because I don't have a license, but my wife has a license. You can give them back to her." And the courts, in their wisdom, said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable." And basically, I think they were put up against a wall, and they thought, "Oh, there's no reason why we can't say no, or why we can say no." And so they gave them back to her. Police department obviously appealed that, and we went and got the weapons back, but we only got half the weapons back. And that was the second job that I was involved with him. And we only got half the weapons back. He had hidden the rest of them, and we still have not recovered the rest of those weapons.
Okay.
29 years after the siege, they are all still out there hidden somewhere. And we presume that he knows where they are and would have access to them. So that was his antecedents, and so we knew that there was a good potential. He was hanging on to weapons. There's still a good chance that he's going to want to use them.
Yeah, and that was that the property that you leopard crawled up to seize the firearms in the first place? Was that the property where the shooting incident occurred, or was that a different property?
No, the first one was out towards Murray Bridge.
Yep.
And that's a different direction in the country, and where the shooting was Nuruyupta.
Okay, and I think the majority of people would understand, but just for those that don't, that when you say you leopard crawl in, you would have been in your camouflage gear and like creeping in to the...
Absolutely, camouflage gear, camouflage on the face, on the belly, crawling through the paddocks where we needed to. If there's bushes for protection, you can walk behind the bushes where you can't be seen, but going under fences and all the rest of it.
And that slow type movement, that would be in a lot of the skills you picked up as a sniper, because that's a big part of training as a sniper.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody in Star Group is cross-trained in all those skills anyway. Yeah. But as a sniper, you're trained to a higher level.
Yeah. Okay, so on the day of the incident, you've been notified that there's been a warrant issued because he didn't turn up for court or had a pretty poor excuse. You've gone to driven there. How many of the Star Group were deployed for the job?
5 of us, and we took one guy with a video camera, and he was a police photographer from photographic section. We're talking 29 years ago. He didn't have a firearm. He didn't have a weapon, and he was coming to this high-risk job with us.
Right.
Certainly something we look back on now and we go, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Not the norm. What was the cameraman there for? What was the purpose behind having it recorded?
The offender was a prolific complainer, and he's got a history of complaining throughout Australia. He's written letters to every parliament in Australia, Queensland, Victoria, Northern Territory, federal. He's written letters complaining about police corruption and all these things. None of it has ever been found to be true, but he's got this history. And every time police go to deal with him, he will put in a list of complaints of what police did wrong. Yeah. Now, we don't really worry about the complaints, but it does mean that we need to sit down and type reports to answer them because we've got to be accountable for everything we did. So we thought we would be smart this time. We would take a video camera with us so that we could prove that his complaints were unfounded.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we thought we'd get on the front foot. It's the first time we've ever taken a video camera. And as it turned out, it became absolutely crucial evidence in court.
Yeah, I could imagine. So the 5 of you have gone down. You've briefed at the local police station. There's been a briefing conducted. You guys are doing your side of it. You'll effect the arrest. The detectives have provided you all the information. Did you have what was the mission? Just to effect the arrest of this person?
Yeah, and basically the mission is always the same: safe resolution of a high risk situation.
Yep.
And whatever tactics we can put into place for that safe resolution for all parties, we do. So we knew that he was on a property, and it was hard to access that property. He had the front gate locked, but then you drive past the front gate and there's a gap in the fence that most people don't know about. Fortunately, the local police knew about this gap in the fence, and that's where he would access his property and egress his property.
Yep.
But the front gate was always locked. We knew that was there, so we sent one of our other snipers out first off, and he was going to set up in the bush. And there was no reason to send the sniper out with a rifle because it just wasn't perceived that the rifle was going to be needed.
Yeah.
But what most people don't understand is that the main role of a sniper is to move into position without being seen, without being heard, and then report back information to the commander so that he can safely run the operation with informed information. And so we sent the sniper out there with just his standard weaponry and a pair of binoculars so that we'd know what the offender was doing. So we knew he was inside the house. We knew he should have been answering the door when we went up there.
Okay, and so the actual plan then, you've got the sniper in place doing his recce and observation, and you guys are going to come down the driveway. Was that the plan?
That was the plan. It took a turn when the sniper was being driven into position by one of the local police officers in a plain car. And as they were driving along the road, they saw the offender driving his own car. And they've radioed back to the commander, the sergeant in charge of the operation, and said, hey, listen, there's an opportunity to do a high-risk vehicle stop here if we can get into place quick enough. And so there was a bit of a scramble around base for the police station, the country police station, and we tried to get into the cars and get out to where he was, but he got home. He was too close to home for us to effect the vehicle stop, which would have been our preference.
Preferred option.
Safer than, and a high-risk vehicle stop is always risky anyway, but it was going to be better than going to his stronghold.
And it's difficult in these rural places too, because the access to it, I can understand why you were keen to get the vehicle stop in preference to going to the place. So
absolutely. There's always going to be in a rural location, there's always going to be a long lead into the property. They've always got a long driveway where they can see you approaching and they can do whatever preparation they need to do.
Yeah, makes it
and
difficult.
That's exactly what happened in this case.
Okay, so the vehicle stop didn't play out, so the decision was to drive in.
To continue on with the original plan of approaching the house, knock on the front door, give him an opportunity to present himself. And if he doesn't present, then we had to play it by how it panned out at that time.
Okay. What time of day was it, Derrick?
2 o'clock we approached the house, and it was 2:15 at the time that I got shot.
So describe the scene and then how you got shot. That's what your role was.
We
in
drove
the team.
into the property. Sorry, say that again.
What your role was in the team, like the way that you approached it.
Okay, so we drove in 2 vehicles. Myself, the driver of the first vehicle, and my partner, and then the sergeant and one other in the second vehicle, and the video camera was in the back seat of the second vehicle. Sniper was obviously in the bush. We drove very quickly through very rough terrain through an orchard, because this is where that second pathway led through. Drove straight up to the house. The video shows us getting out of the marked police vehicles, and we were in full normal police uniform, but we were obviously wearing flak vests. And I like to make a point of the fact that we were wearing flak vests. So most people go, oh, well, you were wearing flak vests, at least you were well protected. A flak vest only protects you against a certain type of bullet, and generally it's a smaller caliber. So they're not bulletproof, they're just a flak vest. But we were wearing them.
They don't cover all of the body either. There's plenty of other parts that can be hit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And have I got a good story about that? And just on that, on a side path, there was a police officer in around about 1986 who was driving in a police car, had his flak vest on, and an offender shot from about 200 metres away with a small caliber rifle, and it went in underneath his armpit and killed him instantly.
Yeah.
And he was in the vehicle wearing his flak vest. So, no, they don't protect you against everything at all. But we went up to the front door. We knocked. We called that we were the police, and we wanted to speak to the person inside. Obviously, there was no answer. But this is where the information from the sniper came invaluable. He said, no, he is definitely inside the house. He should definitely be answering the door. We knocked again, we called again, and all this is on video, and it's available, on my website. Again, he didn't answer. And at this stage, I've moved down the side of the house towards a glass sliding door. One of the things that we have in Star Group is we are military trained, absolute precision. We know exactly what to do because of the briefing. Everybody is given exactly what they need to do, but we are always trained to look for a secondary option. And if there is an easier access point, then everybody can just roll around to that secondary access point, and everybody will know exactly what their role is because we've got so much training behind us in the background. And so I went down the side of the house to look at a glass sliding door to see whether we could effect a faster, more efficient, more effective, safer entry through that door. And as I walked down there, I got within about 2 feet of that sliding door. And this sliding door, we were standing along the front of the house, and the sergeant was knocking on the front door. The sliding door was 5 steps from where I was on the corner down the side. I went that 5 steps to have a look at it, and I was going to come back and say to the sergeant, hey, good option down here. As I got to within about 2 feet of that sliding door, the person inside started to shoot, and I was the target. He was using an SKK, Chinese military weapon, 7.62, so it's the weapon the Chinese use when they go to war, and the bullets fired are the same the Chinese use when they go to war. He fired 18 times, and he hit me 14 times.
What was your initial reaction? What did you think? Could you comprehend what was happening? Did you hear the sound, or did you feel the impact? What was your reaction?
So initially, no, I didn't feel any impact. I didn't feel any pain, and I didn't even hear the sound of gunfire. My initial knowledge that something was going wrong was I just suddenly started falling to the ground. And I had no understanding as to why, and things were going in slow motion, and I'm thinking to myself, why on earth am I falling to the ground? And I was cursing myself with every bad word that a copper can imagine for being so stupid. I'm a highly trained Star Group officer. I don't fall over for no reason. And
so
in slow motion,
thought you were being hard on yourself. You thought you'd just tripped or just fallen.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay.
And in this slow motion, as I'm falling to the ground, I'm just abusing myself. But then I look at that glass sliding door again, and then I see that there are small round holes that hadn't been there before. And then I hear the sound of gunfire in the background. Still haven't felt any impact, haven't felt any pain. But as I'm falling to the ground, abusing myself, I'm rationalizing. Sound of gunfire, small round holes, I must be getting shot. And so in the midst of me abusing myself and falling to the ground, I started rationalizing to myself, Derrick, if you're getting shot, it's acceptable to fall over. Don't be too hard on yourself.
I think that's
And
fair.
that's literally what I thought as I was falling to the ground. And people go, how could you think that? But that's what we get into in the second part of the session. It's how I'd prepared my mind physically, mentally, emotionally to be able to manage everything that I needed to do while still thinking outside the square just that little bit and be relaxed and achieve all the things that I need to achieve. But I'll go on. You've got a question?
You've hit the ground. You've realised that you've been shot. You've processed it all. Things have slowed down, and I've felt that myself in situations. It is like everything's in slow motion. You're on the ground. The bloke's still firing at you. What do you
Absolutely.
think? What's going through your mind? Is it when's he going to hit me in the head, or when's it the fatal shot coming?
No, it didn't quite go to that stage. So I've fallen to the ground, rolled onto my back, and my feet are pointing directly at where the bullets are coming from. My head's facing away, and he's just continually shooting. And he hits me twice in my left thigh. And these are the only two bullets that I remember hitting me. And I remember that because time was so slow that these two bullets fired in that space of time seemed to take 30 seconds. The first one hit me, and it was like a sledgehammer just driving into my thigh. And then I felt this shockwave going up through my body, and my body writhing on the ground as this shockwave has ridden through my body. And then the shockwave I felt coming back down through my body as my body settled back onto the ground. And then the second bullet hit, and again it felt like a sledgehammer just hitting my thigh. And it wasn't pain, it was just an impact. There was literally no pain associated with it. It was just feeling this pounding into my thigh. And again, this shockwave went up, and this shockwave went back down. And again, I started abusing myself because it seemed like I'd been lying there for 30 seconds and just letting this guy shoot me for 30 seconds. So I started abusing myself. How can I lie here for 30 seconds and just accept being shot? And I knew I needed to fire back. Now, I already had my pistol in my hand. And as I lined up to shoot, I realized, and again, this is the thinking outside the square while doing everything I still needed to do, because my response in the video, you'll hear the response. He's shooting at me. He fires about 14 times, and then I fire back, and then he fires a little bit again. So it happens within less than 5 seconds. The shooting starts and then the shooting's finished. So I'm responding just as quickly as I can, but the process running through my mind is I'm lying on my back and I'm shooting back along the length of my body towards where he is. And I realize that, and as I'm lying on my back, my feet are at the other end of my body and my feet are pointing up in the air. And the thought that ran through my head is I need to get my body up just that little bit so I can shoot over the top of my feet. But because the flak vest weighs a hell of a lot of weight, it's about 15, 17 kilos, because we've got a couple of ceramic plates in ours. And we've got weaponry, and I've got equipment on my upper body as well. And as I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And as I pulled the trigger on that first bullet in response, the thought that ran through in my mind is I'd better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. And that is literally what I thought. And I don't embellish that at all. But it didn't stop me doing anything I needed to do.
Yeah.
It's just that thought outside the square and then return fire. I fired back, and I consciously knew that I could not see him. It was dark inside the house. There were some curtains across the door. The sun was coming from behind me and hitting the door, so it was like a mirror. I couldn't see in, so I could only fire in the direction of where the bullets are coming from, the sound of gunfire.
Yeah.
So I consciously wanted to fire just 6 or 7 times. But in the analysis, the video analysis afterwards, turns out I fired 13 times. So I described that as I just got a little bit excited.
Yeah, I understand.
But when I fired, he stopped.
Yeah.
When he stopped, I've rolled to my right a couple of times along the ground. And then, despite the massive injuries that you described before, I'm able to get to my feet. And I'm able to stagger around the corner of the house looking for somewhere safe to hide.
I'm breathless, Derrick. I'm just trying to process what you're going through in such a short period of time, but so many things happening. And I would imagine the response of fight or flight, you had to fire off those rounds, otherwise he would have kept shooting at you till the inevitable would have occurred.
Oh, absolutely. If he had a 30-round magazine, and that was taped to another 30-round magazine, and so he had 60 rounds, and he would have just kept on firing. In my mind, I can't say that unequivocally because that has never been proven, and I need to make sure that's comes across. But in my mind, he would have just kept on shooting if I hadn't fired back.
I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that in those circumstances. I think we'll take a break now, and it's possibly not the best time because we've just left you fatally or potentially fatally wounded with a gunman shooting at you, and you've managed to crawl to what you consider safety. But it wasn't entirely safe, as we'll find out in part 2.
And just a little spoiler alert, it wasn't fatal.
Don't give away the story. We're building up the tension here, Derrick. You've just wrecked it for everyone now. Look, there is so much to talk about, so much to unpack with what's happened, and the fact that you can sit here and we can joke about it, I think, is an incredible testament to the type of person that you are, that you can overcome that. And we're going to delve deep in part 2, not only how you survived, but how you use the lessons that you learnt in this situation. But the way you describe it, I'm sitting here and I consider myself a hardened police officer, but there's not many people that have survived what you've survived. So I'll be really interested to find out if you do survive in part 2.
And I'll just address that lightheartedness. I'm not dismissive of the seriousness, and I don't dismiss risk ever. But being able to be lighthearted in the midst of it, while still having tools to deal with challenges, is a very important aspect of policing.
Most definitely. Well, we'll have a break and we'll be back for part 2. Cheers.
Look forward to it.
Cheers.